Welcome to our program. I'm your host, Sonny Cudd. The most common place for fires to start is inside the home, but that doesn't mean they can't burn outside as well. Lots of fires are started outside, and the end results can be just as tragic as an indoor fire. Today we'll look at some different aspects of outdoor fire safety. First, we'll take a look at how to barbecue and grill safely outdoors. Then we'll talk about keeping your outdoor workspaces safe, how to work safely with fuel, and how to keep storage areas safe. After that, we'll take a look at the great outdoors. We'll learn about the wildland urban interface, or the area where homes and the forest meet, a high-risk fire area, and what you can do to safeguard your home if you live there. And finally, we'll talk about important safety precautions when you're camping in the wilderness. That's all ahead on this program, so stay with us as you get the facts on fire.
A young family here purchased a home. We're remodeling the home. We're 90% complete in remodeling this home that they had spent their life savings on. They had a deck built onto the back of the home. Painting the home, putting the final touches on it. They barbecued that evening. The barbecue pit was out on the deck. Coals fell through the bottom of the barbecue pit after this family left for the evening. When first engine companies arrived, the residence was fully involved. Understand what happened. The coals fell through the bottom of the pit. They fell on a wooden deck. The deck caught fire, very heavy fire though, nothing but wood. It was attached to the back of this house. That was one of the saddest things I'd ever seen, for this family to be so close to moving into this residence, and there it was, totally involved in fire.
Here are some spot quiz questions for you. Can you use gasoline instead of lighter fluid to ignite the coals in your barbecue pit? What should you do if the grill fire begins to die and you want to get it going again? Where should you locate your grill when cooking? And finally, when and how do you dispose of remaining charcoal coals? See if you can answer all these questions correctly, and stay tuned to find out more about preventing fires out of doors.
Whether it's a nice spring day or the 4th of July, backyard barbecues can be a relaxing experience for the whole family. But the flames and the heat can start an unintended fire if you don't grill correctly and fail to take proper precautions. Joining me is firefighter Scotty Shelton. Scotty, in your career, have you seen any fires started in the backyard by barbecue pits or charcoal grills that resulted in loss of property or life?
Sonny, I've seen it a few times. One time comes to mind, it happened recently, was a guy who had finished barbecuing. His family had a great time. Was putting his barbecue pit up, and he went to clean his barbecue pit up. He took the ash and the used briquettes and put them in a garbage can. The coals weren't completely extinguished. He put the garbage can up against the side of the house, and the guy wound up burning his house down just from a careless mistake.
Wow. Well, the grills themselves, there's different types out there, whether they're charcoal or the gas. What are the dangers involving with both of those types of grills?
Recently, I've seen some interesting statistics. The statistics were from the year 2002. It said that 76% of all homes own some type of grill. And there's different types of grills. There's electric grills, there's propane grills, and then regular charcoal grills. Those homes that have a charcoal grill resulted in 6,100 accidents or trips to the emergency room, and resulted in $29.5 million worth of property loss in a single year.
All just from probably just a little bit of negligence or just not knowing what they should do. Let me ask you about safeguarding. If you're one of those 76% that have a grill at their home, what are some safeguards that people can do around the home to protect themselves against a fire from a grill?
Right. Sonny, most of it's common sense. Obviously, don't barbecue next to your house. You want to be at least 10 feet away from your home, a shed, a carport. Be at least 10 feet away. Find a nice level spot to have your grill. Make it a kids-free zone. Keep kids and keep pets away from the grill. Don't wear loose clothing. You want to be sure that you use barbecue utensils with long handles. If you have an apron, or you want to be sure that the apron's tied and not hanging loose. You want to use only approved charcoal lighter. to get the fire going. You never want to add charcoal lighter once the fire is going. You want to be sure that you're not barbecuing underneath something, such as an overhang, a patio, a breezeway, or even a large tree that may catch fire. So you want to be away from all combustibles. Those are just some easy tips. Common sense goes a long way.
Common mistakes typically are made in some of these instances in regards to adding that lighter fluid once the fire is going, things like that. Are there any other common mistakes, things that you see more often than not? You know, the most common type mistakes that might be made.
Sure. One of the more dangerous appliances you can mess with is the propane grill. Obviously, if you just finished refilling your bottle and you have to connect that to the barbecue pit, you want to be sure that you check for leaks. We've heard stories of people checking for propane leaks by using a match or a lighter. Yeah. Not real smart. The easiest way to check for leaks in a propane grill is to take a bottle of soapy water solution and spray the water around the connections. That way, if it bubbles up, you can be sure that you have a leak. If that happens, you want to fix the leak before you try to utilize the barbecue pit. In most LP grills, they have venturi tubes. You want to be sure those venturi tubes stay clear of grease, insect nests. Dirt daubers are famous for building nests inside of venturi tubes. You always want to be sure those tubes stay clear and clean. And when you get ready to use the barbecue pit, be sure all the grease and stuff is removed, because that can also flare up.
What about reminders? Are there reminders that people can do before starting their barbecue pit or grill up to keep things safe? You know, not waiting until it's gone bad for them. What can they do ahead of time?
One of the things they can do for sure, Sonny, and it's great you brought that up, is to always have a multi-purpose fire extinguisher handy, or water. A good thing to have is a spray bottle of water for flare-ups when the grease hits the fire and flares up. An easy way to control that is just with a few squirts of water so it doesn't get out of hand. Something you always want to be sure of is when you're using your propane. You always want to have the propane tanks turned off until you're ready to use it. A common mistake we've seen happen is people will turn the propane on with the lid closed, and as they open the lid up and hit the igniter, the gas will explode in their face or flare in their face. We've seen that a few times. People have actually been burnt utilizing propane grills in the wrong way.
Often just those common little mistakes that they just need to take those early precautions on. How about the smoke or vapor from these pits? You mentioned people grilling underneath overhangs, or you know, some places on their balcony or small patio at an apartment complex. That smoke can tend to get trapped around there. Is that smoke toxic? Is it toxic the way smoke from a house fire is considered toxic?
Definitely. Anytime you've got fire, combustion, one of the side products of that is carbon monoxide. And obviously carbon monoxide is dangerous. You never want to grill inside, obviously, but because of the carbon monoxide can cause suffocation.
Thanks, Scott. Let's hope everyone's a little safer now with their backyard barbecues. We'll be right back after these messages.
Let's briefly summarize some barbecue safety tips. Always grill outdoors away from combustible sources, like a roof or tree branch. Keep the grill area clear of people and activity. It's easy to accidentally fall onto the grill and get burned. Never use gasoline to light charcoal. It can cause an explosion. On LP gas grills, check for leakage. Always use the manufacturer's instructions, and never place a gas grill indoors. Be extremely careful not to overfill propane tanks. Never leave the cooking fire unattended, and always have a plan of what you should do if something or someone catches on fire. Have a properly rated fire extinguisher and a bucket of water handy. Don't dispose of coals until they're cooled off, and don't put them into a combustible container. You can make sure they're cooled off by dousing them with water. Do you know how to use your fire extinguisher? If you don't, your extinguisher is useless. Use the pass principle. First, pull the pin. Next, aim at the base of the fire. Third, squeeze the lever or button above the handle. And finally, sweep from side to side. You should be about 10 feet away from the fire. That's pass. Pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. If a fire has gotten too big, exit the house immediately. This message brought to you by the Facts on Fire Network.
Welcome back. I'm chatting with firefighter Scotty Shelton about fire safety when you're outdoors. Scotty, what are some of the common myths or misperceptions about backyard barbecue safety?
Sonny, probably one of the most common is the fact that a barbecue fire can't happen to me. You're dealing with fire. If you got a propane grill, you're dealing with a highly volatile gas. It's very easy for accidents to happen, and things can get out of control in just a heartbeat if you're not careful and you don't use common sense and you don't use good safety standards.
Scott, let's take a moment to summarize some of the precautions that we can take to prevent that backyard barbecue fire.
Okay, Sonny. Common sense goes a long way. Common sense is always going to be your best tool. Remember to stay at least 10 feet away from all buildings. Always be aware of what's overhead, carports, breezeways, overhanging branches. You want to be sure none of that's overhead. Always keep the kids and pets away from your barbecue pit. Have a kids-free zone. Don't let them anywhere near it. When you start to dispose of your charcoal or your ash, be sure that they're completely out. If you're not sure, be sure and wet them down and put them in a non-combustible container. Always check your LP grills for leaks with a soap solution and never use a lighter or matches. Always be sure that you don't wear loose clothing. You want to be sure that you have long-handled utensils and an insulated mitt if you're working around your grill. And you always want to be sure that you're on a nice flat level surface. You want to be sure that the grill doesn't tip over. You never want to use anything but approved charcoal lighter fluid when you're using your grill. In other words, never use gasoline or diesel or Varsol or something like that to help keep the fire going. If your fire does go out, you want to be sure that maybe you put some dry kindling on there if you want to try to get it going again, but never use anything such as lighter fluid or gas or diesel, as I said before.
Scotty, thanks once again for that information.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's estimated that outdoor grills lead to more than 6,000 fires a year, causing death, injury, and major property damage. That's why it's so important to cook only in the appropriate places. Don't grill next to combustible material like roof overhangs or dangling branches. And make sure the place where you plop your barbecue pit down is a no-traffic zone. Remember, location, location, location. This message brought to you by the Facts on Fire Network. Now it's time to see how you did on that spot quiz. Can you use gasoline instead of lighter fluid to ignite the coals in a barbecue pit? The answer to that question is a resounding no. All it takes for flammable substances like gas to explode is a small spark. Never, repeat, never use gasoline or other flammable gases on a charcoal grill. What should you do if the grill fire begins to die? Add dry kindling and fan the fire to bring it back to life. Don't throw lighter fluid on it. The fire might quickly and violently surge at you. Where should you locate your grill when cooking? Make sure the barbecue pit or gas grill is located away from any foot traffic, play areas, or any sports recreation. Declare a kid-free, activity-free zone around the grill, and never leave the grill unattended. Make sure the grill is not under an overhang or tree branch. And finally, when and how do you dispose of the charcoal coals? Make sure that the fire is out and the coals have cooled off. Never place them in containers made of paper, plastic, or wood. If you want to quickly put out the fire on the coals, douse them with water. But stand far enough back so that you don't get burned by hot smoke and steam.
It seems so harmless, but you can never be too safe around a barbecue pit or propane grill. Be prepared and use common sense. Make sure you're in control of your fire so your fire doesn't get out of control.
We were dispatched one time for a report of a man burned. I can remember distinctly pulling up in front of this residence, and there's a guy standing out by the road, running around like he's got ants in his pants, and it looked from a distance like he had all these strings hanging off his arms and his hands and even his legs. And we'll come to find out those strings were his skin. This guy had been burning rubbish in a barrel and thought the fire was out. So he took a can of gasoline and was going to restart his fire. Well, as soon as he poured the gasoline into the barrel, there were some embers below some of the rubbish, and the fire flashed on him. And he was burnt from the top of his head to the tips of his toes.
You store all kinds of stuff in there: lawnmowers, ladders, tools, and chemicals. You use items in the garage or shed to help you get the job done around the house. If you're not careful, though, some of the chemicals and gases in there can destroy your property and do harm to your loved ones.
Here are some spot quiz questions about fuel. Is it okay to smoke a cigarette while working on your car? Is there danger of fire when filling up my vehicle? How can you lessen the chances of a lawnmower fire? Jot those questions down and see if you have the answers. And please stay with us. We'll be right back. A recent annual report showed that 4,700 house fires were related to gasoline. As a result of those fires, 86 people died, nearly 500 were injured, and there were $92 million of property damage. 1 gallon of gasoline can have the same explosive force as a stick of dynamite. Handle gasoline with care and be careful with all flammable gases. Stay tuned for more Facts on Fire.
Welcome back. I'm with firefighter Scotty Shelton, and we're going to be discussing fuel safety in the yard, in the shed, and with your car. Scotty, we've heard of fires involving gasoline a lot. What are some of the things to be aware of when using gasoline and storing it?
Sonny, what we see most of the time is people misusing gasoline. Gasoline was used, or was designed to be used in internal combustion engines. We see people out there misusing gasoline by trying to start fires with it, trying to use gasoline as a solvent or a cleaner. You never want to use gasoline indoors. We see that quite a bit, people using gasoline indoors. You always want to be sure that you store gasoline appropriately in approved containers. You never want to put gasoline in Coke bottles or milk jugs and all that silly stuff. Gasoline is a liquid, but it gives off vapors, and the vapors are highly explosive. It doesn't take much of a spark to ignite gasoline, and it'll burn.
You mentioned storing gasoline in containers, obviously no Coke bottles or milk jugs, but even in the approved containers. What about completely filling even the approved containers? Is that something that people want to do? What can happen there with the gasoline and the vapors?
I understand what you're saying. You should never completely fill a gas can. You want a vapor space inside the gas can that will allow the gas to be able to expand if it needs to.
What about, you go to the gas station, you have your approved container, you do everything properly there, but now it's time to bring this gasoline container home, but you're in a car. What do you need to do with that container?
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. First off, let's talk about filling the can up. Something that you never want to do is fill a gas can inside the back of a pickup truck or in the trunk of your car. You always want to take the gas can and put it on the ground. And before you start dispensing gas, you want to take the nozzle of the gas nozzle and touch it to the tip of the can. What happens is static electricity builds up around the nozzle as the gas passes through the hose, and static electricity can ignite the gas vapors. So you want to be sure that the gas can is sitting on the ground and you touch the nozzle to the gas can before you start dispensing gas into the can. You talk about bringing it home. Obviously you want to secure the can in an upright position in the back of a truck. If you have to transport a gas can in the back of a car, it's best to do it in the trunk. What you want to do is secure the trunk in an open position for ventilation, but be sure the trunk is secured so it doesn't bounce up and down.
What about tips for storing gasoline at home? You made it home from the gas station. You have your container, store it around the home. Can you put it just anywhere? What are some tips there?
Another good question, Sonny. Something you need to remember about gas vapors. Gas vapors are heavier than air. Most people have the misconception that gas vapors will rise and get up out of the way. Gas vapors are heavier than air, 2 to 3 times heavier than air, and gas vapors will actually sink down to the ground and travel along the ground until they come to an ignition source. So you want to be sure that you keep gasoline cans away from pilot lights such as hot water heaters or furnaces, or anywhere that may be an open flame, you want to be sure that your gas cans are stored away from those type of places. Don't store gasoline in your house. Always try to keep it in a shed or a storage room away from your house.
There are those homes out there that have the outside storage shed or utility room that maybe that hot water heater is in also, so you don't want to put that in there at all, correct?
If you can avoid it, yes, but
Yeah.
you want to be sure that your gas can is always secured and the lids are on there tight. Keep gas cans away from kids. Don't let the kids in the gas mix at all, ever.
How about, you know, you're working around the house, you're cutting the lawn or what have you, you happen to turn that gas can over, now you have gas on the ground, maybe on your patio or the driveway or what have you. What can we do to clean that gasoline up? I'm assuming a water hose washing it off is not something you want to do.
Glad you brought that up. Something else to remember about gasoline is gasoline will actually float on the top of water. So if you try to clean a gasoline spill up by putting water on it, the gas will actually float to the top of the water. So it's not a very good idea. One of the easiest ways to clean up a gas spill would be using clay kitty litter. If you have any of that around the house, maybe the neighbors may have some around the house, but clay kitty litter will actually absorb the gasoline.
What about if you're cleaning up gasoline, you didn't have the kitty litter, so you grab a bunch of old shop rags or something, just try to soak it up. What should we do about those rags now? The gasoline's in these rags now. Can the gas still release vapor from the rags? And if so, what precautions can we take as far as the storage or disposal of those rags?
If you use rags to clean up gas spills, what you want to do first is be sure that you thoroughly wet the rags after you try to clean the gas up. Remember that the gas and water is not going to mix very well. And then you want to take those rags and you want to put them in a non-combustible container and dispose of them that way.
How about if you're working on your car with using gasoline? There's, you know, we know stories from our line of work. We certainly know stories about people using gasoline to do things to their car other than put it in the internal combustion engine. What are some problems there?
What we've seen, I'm sure you've seen, I've seen, is people pouring gasoline into a carburetor trying to get an engine to start. That's a no-no. That's something you never want to do. Obviously, you never want to smoke around gasoline. If you're working on your car, such as a fuel line or something like that, you always want to be sure that the battery cables are disconnected. That way there's no accidental spark from the electrical system that could accidentally start a fire.
That's good information that we can all learn on fuel safety. We'll be right back.
Here's a quick summary of important fire prevention points when dealing with fuel. Be careful with gas fumes. They're highly explosive. Store gasoline in approved metal or plastic containers or cans. Keep gas away from flammable substances and away from other gases. Never smoke around gas sources. Never fill your gas container on the trunk of a car or on the bed of a truck. Put the top on tightly. When you're mowing, never add gasoline to a hot engine. And when you're done mowing, wait until the engine is cooled off before putting it back into your shed. Keep gasoline outside only, and make sure it's locked up so kids can't play with it. When you're working on your car, it's a good idea to have a multi-class fire extinguisher close at hand. Undo battery cables to minimize the chance of electrical sparks which could ignite fuel. At the gas station, don't top off gas and never fill up the tank while the car is still running. It's also a good idea to minimize chances of static electricity by filling up a gas container on the ground and by keeping the nozzle in contact with the approved gas can.
We're rejoined by firefighter Scotty Shelton, and we're talking about gasoline safety. Scotty, what are some of the myths or misconceptions about people using gasoline for purposes that it's not really intended for?
That's right, Sonny. We see that all the time. People try to use gasoline as a cleaner. They try to start maybe a brush fire, a rubbish fire using gasoline. We see that quite a bit, and it's dangerous. Gasoline is highly explosive. The vapors are volatile. It doesn't take much of a spark. Gasoline vapors are heavier than air, so they sink, and once they sink, they'll travel across the ground until they find an ignition source, and then they'll flash all the way back to the source. So it's extremely dangerous to try to use gasoline for anything other than its intended purpose.
How about the misconception in regards to, you know, we mentioned earlier that a spark, a flame as a source to ignite that gasoline. But what about the person that they're cutting the grass, they need some more gas, they're not done, you'll have to fill up the tank. In doing so, they pour gasoline out onto this hot engine. Now, there's no spark involved, it's just hot. Is that a precaution, or is that a danger as well, a hazard?
Definitely, and that's something that you don't want to do. Let the engine cool down a little bit before you add any extra gas, and always use a funnel, or if not a funnel, at least a spout leading from the gas can to the engine. You don't want to spill gasoline outside of the approved container or the gas tank of the engine. So always let the engine cool down first before you add any additional gas, and once you're finished cutting grass for the day, you want your engine to be completely cool before you put it inside your storage shed or your building.
Scott, I'd like to thank you for being here with us today. It's been some very valuable information. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
Did you ever wonder how dangerous it is to fill up your car with gasoline at a filling station? It's estimated there were 7,400 fires and explosions at service stations. That's an average of about 1 for every 13 gas stations. It's important to minimize your chances of something going wrong. Don't smoke when you're pumping, and don't keep the car running while it's pumping. This message brought to you by the Facts on Fire Network. Here are the spot quiz answers. See how you did. Is it okay to smoke a cigarette while working on your car? Definitely not. You put your life and other people's lives at risk if you smoke around fuel or flammable materials. The car could easily catch on fire. It's estimated that once a fire is started and there's plenty of fuel, it might take only 20 seconds for it to blow up. Be smart when working with gas. Is there danger of fire when filling up my vehicle? Yes, there's a danger of a fire being ignited or an explosion. Minimize your chances by turning the engine off whenever you're filling up. Also, don't top off. How can you lessen the chances of a lawnmower fire? Don't fill up the engine with gas when the mower is still hot. Also, wait until the engine is cool before placing the lawn equipment back into the shed.
So there you have it. Be safe with gasoline and other gases and chemicals. Store them correctly and use them properly. And remember, it's always a good idea to have a fire extinguisher handy when doing work on a car or lawn type equipment. Make sure you know how to use the fire extinguisher and be prepared for any situation.
The reason why we have wildland urban interface areas is because a lot of folks choose to be right next to the forest boundary. The aesthetic and very pleasing forest is very nice to live by, but at the same time, people take a risk of having high fire danger.
The problems with urban interface is that when houses are built out on the edge of the forest, fire has been left out of that ecosystem for a while for the most part, so that the houses then simply replace the trees and shrubs, and the houses themselves become the fuel that can burn.
Do you live in the country with a forest as your backyard? If you do, then your house could be in the way of potentially dangerous wildfires burning out of control, a threat that city residents don't encounter. Many of these rural homes are in a zone called the Wildland Urban Interface, or I-Zone. That's the place where the homes meet the forest and where the danger of wildland fires is a real threat. But there are some steps you can take to defend your house. Stay tuned and you'll find out how.
When a wildfire strikes near a residential area, what part of a home is usually in the greatest danger of catching on fire? A woodpile is located in a storage area, which is connected to the home. Is this a fire hazard or not? As a wildland fire approaches your area, you realize that all your escape routes are blocked. What should you do? What is your home's best defense against a raging wildfire? Think about these questions and then try to answer them. Later on, you can check to see if you got them right. Stay with us for more Facts on Fire.
Here's the scene. Maybe you've just moved from the city to a nice peaceful country home. The beautiful sights and sounds, trees, birds, fresh air. But this peaceful setting can become a disaster zone if fire becomes part of the landscape. Join me To discuss the ins and outs of rural fire safety is forestry educator Holly Morgan. Holly, can you tell us about experiences that you've had where wildland fires have affected residential homes?
Sure. Many of the fires are started by homeowners burning debris. One of the worst fires I've seen was started by a homeowner who was burning trash in a barrel behind their trailer house. The wind picked the sparks up out of the barrel and blew into the surrounding forest. Since the forest was so dry, it immediately caught on fire. This homeowner ended up losing not only their trailer and all their belongings, but they burnt up several hundred acres of forest land around them.
Well, what are some of the things that a homeowner can do to protect their home and property against forest fires?
One of the main things a homeowner can do is create defensible space around their home. What is defensible space? Well, this is an area about 30 foot around a home where it's free from a lot of trees and shrubs. There's no dead plants. You've cleared it out fairly well. You don't have any firewood stacked up against your house, and you've got a well-maintained lawn. This is an area where fires will not carry from the forest to your house. Now, if you live at the top of a steep slope, you may want to have a wider defensible space, maybe even 100 feet, to protect your home.
We talked about different types of vegetation and shrubbery. Does vegetation make a difference as far as the rate of fire spread?
It sure does. You want to use plants in your landscape that are fire resistant. An example of that is azalea bushes, ivies, irises, plants that hold water, plants that are not prone to dry out. These plants won't carry a fire if it gets into your yard, especially if they're up around your house.
Is there anything such as bad vegetation? That's an example of good. What about bad?
There's lots of bad vegetation that people use in their landscapes. Highly flammable, oily, aromatic plants such as wax myrtle, yaupon holly, very bad plants to have in your landscape. Fire can easily ignite them, and since they have these oils in them, they explode easily, which creates a much more volatile fire. Another example of a very bad plant to use is ornamental grasses. Especially when they're dried out, they easily catch on fire and can carry a fire from the forest to your home.
Plant shrubberies, is it something that they should be allowed to just grow as large as they would like, or should you keep them at a manageable height?
Plants should be pruned to a manageable height, especially around your home. Keep them well maintained. That's the most important part. Plant islands of shrubbery throughout your yard where they're not contiguous or touching each other. That way flames won't carry from shrubbery to your home.
You have your home out in the forest, so you have the trees of the forest to contend with, but people also want to plant their own trees, in their yard or what have you. What are some precautions that should be taken there?
Well, trees are great in the landscape. I encourage people to plant hardwood trees, such as oaks, hickories, dogwoods, magnolias, trees that won't easily carry a fire. However, if you live in the pine forest, that's not always possible. And pines are all right in the landscape too. Just be sure you space them out so that the crowns don't touch. Keep them about 20 or 30 feet apart. That way fire won't carry throughout the crown of the trees. Also, it's very important to keep the limbs of your trees pruned. Keep them at least 8 to 10 feet above the ground so that fire cannot climb from the ground to your trees. You also need to manage the underbrush under your trees. Fire can climb easily with ladder fuels such as vines or overgrown shrubs that will reach the limbs of the trees. So it's important to keep all of that cleared out.
How about some other features involving the house itself or access to the house? If the fire department is going to come out for a wildland fire, what are some things that they're going to need that will help them do their job?
One of the most important things a homeowner can do is keep a cleared area between your property and the tree line. Don't place any buildings, utility lines, sheds, landscaping in this area. This is an area where the firefighters can bring their equipment and fight the forest fire and protect your home. Another important thing you can do is have a good driveway approximately 12 feet wide. This can provide a fire break if the fire does get into your property. Access is extremely important for the rural firefighters. The equipment is large, it needs a good road in order to get into your property, and it needs a place to turn around when it gets there. Some of the newer subdivisions only have one way in and one way out, and that makes it difficult for firefighting equipment to get in, especially if the residents are having to evacuate. It's important to make sure that your property is well marked so that firefighters can find your house.
We've talked about the property now and the surrounding area. What about the house itself? What precautions can we do to the house to guard against wildland fire?
The leading cause of wildland fire damage to homes is a flammable roof. It's important to use Class A materials like fiberglass asphalt or metal or tile.
What about the roofs? Should the roof be kept clean at all time? Roofs, gutters, things like that?
Yes, it's important to keep debris off of your roof and out of your gutters. It's also a good idea to screen any openings under your eaves to keep debris from getting in there. Also, under your deck or trailer, if you can put some screening in front of it, that'll keep debris from getting underneath it.
Out in the country, as they say, most of the homes have fireplaces. What about the firewood? Can I store that on that deck?
It's not a good idea to store your firewood next to your house. Store it at least 30 feet away, outside your defensible space.
About fences now, you know, maybe I've got animals or some small children I want to, you know, keep safe. So I build a fence. Is the type of fence I build, can that present a problem?
If your fence is connected to your house, it's a good idea to build it out of fire-resistant materials such as metal. If you have a large privacy fence, don't let vegetation grow up on it that can also cause the fire to travel up to your home.
Thanks for that great information. Before you find yourself stuck in a situation where fire is moving toward your house, remember to plan ahead and take the proper precautions now. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute.
Find ways to make your home more defensible against wildfire. What have you got to lose? Except everything.
Let's summarize what you can do to protect your home from wildfires moving through the I zone. First, you want to create a defensible area around your home. Make sure there's a 30-foot space around the home with a minimum of trees and shrubs. You may need more space if you live near the crest of a slope. Prune trees. Get rid of dead branches and piles of leaves and any other undergrowth. Do this in early spring or late fall. Follow all your local regulations concerning burn piles and absolutely do not burn anything on dry, windy days. Landscape with fire-resistant plants that hold lots of water and salt. Create fire breaks with rock, mulch, and flower gardens. Make sure your driveway is at least 12 feet wide. Make sure the signs to your house can be easily seen from the road. The same holds true for your house number. Build your house with fire-resistant materials, particularly your roof. Remember, anything connected to the house is part of the house. Make sure that firewood and other combustible materials are stored at least 30 feet away from the house. And cover any openings in vents or eaves with screen mesh, no larger than 6 millimeters.
We're back with forestry educator Holly Morgan discussing the safety in the wildland-urban interface. Holly, what are some of the common myths or misperceptions about people living in what we call the I zone?
Well, many people think that wildfire is a western issue, that it only happens in the western states. This is not true. The pine forests of the east are a fire-dependent ecosystem. They burn regularly. If you live in this forest, you need to fix your house area so that it doesn't easily catch fire when this forest catches on fire.
How about one of the myths being that if a wildland fire was to break out, that you don't need to worry too much about it because if it gets too close, you can simply outrun it?
It's hard to outrun a wildfire, especially if a fire is traveling uphill. Fire travels faster uphill than it does on flat land.
How about, you mentioned a little earlier about response times. Can a fire department in a rural area respond as quickly as a city fire department could in the neighborhood?
No, and a lot of people don't realize that it takes quite a while for a rural fire department to respond, much longer than in the city. It's because most rural fire departments are volunteer firefighters. They usually have a job or they're somewhere else when they get the call, and it takes a little while for them to get there to the fire. Also, the state firefighters must bring a fire plow to plow out a wildland fire, so it takes them some time to get there.
Well, thanks a lot for clearing up some of those common misconceptions. We'll be back in just a moment.
Did you know that the front of a wildfire can reach temperatures of up to 2,000 degrees? The surging firestorm creates its own weather. 3 of the 10 deadliest fires in U.S. history were forest fires. And 4 out of 5 forest fires are started by people, many of them accidental. So be careful not to start a wildfire, and make sure that your home is prepared to survive a fire in the forest. Stay with us for more Facts on Fire. Now, here are your spot quiz answers. When a wildfire strikes near a residential area, what part of the home is usually in the greatest danger of catching on fire? By far, the most common area for a wildfire to burn a house down is the roof. If the roof is made of a flammable material, a crown fire can leap from the forest and burn the house down from top to bottom. So build fire-resistant roofs and keep leaves and branches out of gutters and eaves. A wood pile is located in a storage area, which is connected to the home. Is this a fire hazard or not, and why? Yes, it is a fire hazard. Anything connected to the house is part of the house. Firewood should be located at least 30 feet away from the home. As a wildland fire approaches your area, and you realize that all your escape routes are blocked, what should you do? Do not try to outrace a fire. The safest thing to do is stay inside and stay calm. You've already prepared your home and yard. Now shut off the circuit breaker for air and heat. Disconnect appliances. Turn off the gas. And close and lock windows and doors. If you have plenty of advance notice, turn sprinklers and hoses on the grass and roof. What is your best defense against raging wildfire? A well-maintained defensible perimeter space is your best defense against wildfire damage. Make certain you have cleared and thinned trees and underbrush within a 30-foot radius around your home.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Every year, hundreds of homes are destroyed by wildfire. Rural houses are in a uniquely precarious situation because many of them are completely surrounded by combustible sources like trees and undergrowth. Add to that the seclusion, limited water, and the fire department being many miles away, and you have a recipe for fire disaster. Precious minutes can mean the loss of your home. That's why it's so important to prepare ahead. Make sure you've done all you can to make your house safe against the attack of a wildfire. And hey, then enjoy the peace and quiet.
Each year, thousands are senselessly killed by people with no criminal record at all. People like you.
Camping is the most enjoyable outing for outdoor enthusiasts. Enjoying beautiful scenery, the wildlife, the sounds. Some people even enjoy the aspect of roughing it, leaving the telephone behind, pitching your tent, and starting a nice warm campfire. It's a relaxing scene for many people, but it's also very dangerous. No, not because of bears or wolves. I'm talking about the campfire. If it's not done properly and safely, you could quickly turn that Forest of Eden into a den of flaming disaster. Stay tuned and find out how you can avoid troubles in the forest.
First, where should you light a campfire? It's a dry, windy day, and you've decided to go camping. Is it safe to light a campfire? Is there such a thing as a safer tent? How far away should your tent be from the campfire? The campfire has a few burning embers left. Is the fire completely out? Where should you not park at a campsite? And finally, what is the best place to store your unburned logs?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll put that out.
Welcome back. We're talking about camping safety. It's something that's very important, but something people don't always think about. If you make a mistake with fire in the woods, you could be the cause of injuries and death to hundreds of people, as well as thousands and thousands of dollars of property damage. So the stakes are very high. Holly, what are some of the things that we can do as far as a first line of defense in being safe from fire when camping?
Well, the best thing you can do is to plan ahead. It's important to educate your family about fire safety lessons, such as stop, drop, and roll. Also educate your children. Teach them to bring you matches and not to play around a fire.
How about some of the equipment that we use while we're camping, tents, things of that nature?
It's important to buy a fire-resistant tent. Some of the cotton tents catch on fire very easily. Also, never have an open flame inside your tent. Bring a flashlight with batteries to use inside the tent for your light.
What about the setup? You have your campground area and you want to set up camp. What's the safest way to do that?
Well, plan where you're going to have your campfire first, and then try to position your tent at least 15 feet away from it. That way it'll be safe if any sparks blow away from your campfire. Also, plan an escape route in case something does catch on fire. How will you get out of your tent? Be sure your family knows how to do this too.
Okay. So you have your campsite is set up now. Can you start a fire at just any campsite, anywhere you go? It's okay. You're camping. You need a fire. You can just start one.
No, it's important to check the local ordinances and laws, and also check for closure orders. If it's very dry, sometimes a campground will have a closure order and no campfires will be allowed. So it's very important to check all those things first.
How about weather conditions? You mentioned plan ahead earlier. Would it be a good idea to check the weather forecast, what's going on in relation to the current conditions?
Sure, it's very important to check the weather, especially the wind. If it's been relatively dry before you get ready to go camping, if there's going to be a lot of wind, you may not want to have a campfire because embers can easily get caught up and blown out into the forest.
If I have my campsite and everything's legal, I'm obeying the laws and the ordinances, it's not too dry and all that, how about setting up the campfire itself? What's the safe way to actually set up, build that campfire, and maintain it?
Well, check for overhanging limbs and branches. Try to build your campfire away from any trees. Then clear an area, about 8 to 10 foot radius around your campfire. Keep it free from debris that could catch on fire.
How about any other fuels that we might be using with the campsite, not necessarily in relation to the fire, but just some other fuels that may be around?
Well, if you have any kerosene or propane in your campsite, be sure to store that far away from a campfire. Also keep your firewood upwind from the campfire and a distance away from it.
You hear a couple of terms. You hear campfire, and then you hear bonfire. Which one do we want to maintain at that campsite? Can I just build any size fire that I want?
Well, it's not a good idea to have a giant bonfire inside a campsite. There's too many things that could catch on fire. Try to keep your campfire small. If there's a metal fire ring or a rock ring, try to keep your campfire built inside of it, and it'll be a whole lot safer.
How about it's time to put that fire out, or in the event something happened, we ended up with a little problem. Our campfire's gotten away from us a little bit. What can we do to maybe keep things a little safer there?
Well, try to have a fire extinguisher, or if you don't have that, a bucket of water close by that you can use to put out a fire if it does escape.
How about the overall safety around the campsite, especially in regards to to fires getting out of hand and in regards to children around the campsite?
Well, safety around a campfire is just the same as safety around your home. Make sure that you know the fire safety techniques. Stop, drop, and roll is a very good technique if you accidentally catch on fire. Children around a campfire are very dangerous. You need to educate them. Teach them there's no horseplay around a campfire. If they want to roast marshmallows, teach them to go down on one knee instead of leaning over the campfire. That way, if they lose their balance, they won't accidentally fall into the campfire.
That's very good. How about it's time to go? Time, you know, the camping trip is over with. It's time to put that fire out. What precautions do we need to take to put the fire out and then to make sure the fire is going to stay out once we're gone?
Putting a fire out is probably the most important lesson you'll learn about campfire safety. Pour water on the fire, stir the fire, then shovel dirt on the fire. Stir it again. Make sure that it is out cold before you leave the fire. Never leave a smoldering campfire.
Thanks very much for that very important camping information. We'll be back in just a moment.
Here's a summary of camping safety. Buy a fire-resistant tent. Teach everyone to stop, drop, and roll for a close fire. Use only flashlights and battery-powered lights in your tent. Set up your tent at least 15 feet away from where your campfire is located. Don't start a fire on a windy day or in drought conditions. Follow local laws and ordinances. Clear an 8 to 10 feet radius around the campfire pit. Never ever leave the fire unattended. Have a bucket of water and shovel handy. Don't let the fire get too big. Make sure that you've completely put out your fire, out cold. And finally, use common sense.
It doesn't matter how you put it out, as long as you put it out. If you start a fire, put it out.
Welcome back. We are talking with Holly Morgan, a forestry educator, about camping fires. Holly, what are some of those misconceptions or myths in regards to camping fires?
Well, many people that camp in a developed camping area are lulled into a false sense of security. There's a lot of times a metal fire ring in these areas, and they think since they have a campfire inside a metal fire ring that it's safe to leave that fire unattended. Never, never leave a campfire unattended. And when you leave, make sure that it's out cold.
Holly, let's talk about some of the overall campsite safety issues as far as the event of having a safe camping trip.
Well, it's real important to place your tent at least 15 feet away from your campfire to prevent it from catching on fire from sparks. And make sure that your campfire is out when you leave. Pour water on it, stir the ashes, shovel dirt onto it and stir it again. Make sure it's out cold.
Holly, thanks for the information you've given us today on safety as far as wildland fires around our home and campfire safety when we go out of doors. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back in just a moment.
And here are the answers to your spot quiz test. First, where should you light a campfire? Campfires should be lit in an area that's clear of debris and overhanging branches and away from your tent. It's a dry, windy day and you've decided to go camping. Is it safe to light a campfire? It's best not to light a campfire on a windy day or on days of drought-ridden conditions. Follow the local laws. Is there such a thing as a safer tent? Yes, you can purchase flame-resistant tents, which are the safest around fire. How far away should your tent be from your campfire? Tents should be at least 15 feet away from campfires. The campfire has a few burning embers left. Is the fire completely out? No. Make sure you douse the fire with water until it's out cold and there are no signs of embers. Where should you not park at a campsite? Don't park over grassy areas at a campsite. Heat from underneath your car could spark a fire. particularly with drought-like conditions. And finally, what is the best place to store your unburned logs? You should store unburned logs upwind of your campfire. That way, flames will be blowing in the opposite direction.
Plenty of information to think about next time you're out of doors. Whether it be your backyard, your carport, the woods, or a campsite, be prepared to prevent devastating fires and to make the proper response if a fire does break out. It takes a little time to learn about fire safety. It only takes a second for a fire to start. Those are today's Facts on Fire. Thank you for joining us.